All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. Going to be getting into the showdown slate here for the Thursday slate. It's going to be the Chicago Bears versus the Seattle Seahawks, and this is kind of, I don't want to say it's a great slate. There are going to be some slight edges here, but really, we are going to see the theme this week for week 2 in the preseason is that coaching tendencies are going to be thrown off, whether that's because of injury news or whether that's going to be because of joint practices that are going on all around the league. Some of the coaches are going to use that as their game for the week, and they're going to get their backups a lot of playing time. A lot of coaches are going to use this as the national game week, as the preseason week 2, which used to be kind of the preseason week 3, which would be the tune-up week. So a lot of different coaching philosophies are going to go into this week 2 shutdown slate. So it is going to be a difficult one. It is one in which we are going to have to be sharp to have a good shutdown slate and a little bit of luck, but we're going to get into it, guys. Should be a decent slate. I am excited about this slate because I went through and watched all the preseason games. Some of the games were fun to watch, honestly. Like, I like knowing this stuff, one, because, well, it helps out right now for preseason purposes, and it's going to help out later on in the season. Like, Rhamondre Stevenson knew he'd be a stud once he finally got the workload. Jacoby Myers, kind of same thing with the Patriots there. This stuff is going to pay off eventually, whether it's, during this season, today, tonight, next week, or next year. Like, eventually it's going to pay off. And that's why someone like Christian Wilkerson for last week's slate, like, I knew he'd be a stud because of the research I had done with preseason DFS the year prior. Okay, and that's kind of why I like doing this. So let's get into it, guys. All right, so we are looking at it right now. So we got my cats are going crazy back there. I apologize. They're turning 1 tomorrow, so wish them a happy birthday in the comments, everyone. But we got the Chicago Bears versus Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to go team by team like I typically do. So the Chicago Bears, they are going to have their starters only play about a series or two. They're calling it 6 to 10 plays. I'm taking that as if we have a good series in the first series, they're not playing again. If it's a terrible series, they're going back out there again for the second series. Okay, that is going to be what it is. So like Justin Fields, I don't think we want to play him. After that, at the quarterback situation, can it be Trevor Siemian? Again, Trevor Siemian only threw the ball 13 times last week. So for me, I don't think that's enough. And with that, like, if he is going to play the majority of the snaps at the quarterback spot for the Chicago Bears, with Nathan Peterman coming in for relief, like, it doesn't really make sense to play any of the Chicago Bears quarterbacks in this game. So for me, kind of just fading those guys, okay? So from there, I do like the running back situation. I've been putting it out on Twitter, kind of a thread of my thoughts from the film for preseason week 1. One of the thoughts I had from the Chicago Bears was, man, their running backs all look good. They did. Okay, a lot of people have been calling for Khalil Herbert to potentially be a sleeper pick because he could take over David Montgomery's role. A lot of that's coming from the fact that he's currently injured right now. And, David Montgomery was the team last year. So, he's probably a little bit overworked, so he wasn't popping as much as on film as people would like. I'm guessing that's why. And Khalil Herbert does look good. He looks like a solid NFL running back. But you look at Khalil Herbert last week compared to like what Treston Ebner did and Darrington Evans did, like, they both look good. Like, I still love Treston Ebner in this one. Like, I think he could be a great shutout play. I think you could actually end up having him in your core. Like, he has been that good of a play. So, yeah, Treston Ebner right now, just kind of put him in the core play captain spot right now because I think he's, like, that good of a player. He did it in the passing game. He did it in the run game. He just looked very solid. And then you look at, like, Darrington Evans. He was a player that looked really good as well. It's going to be tough for me not to play him as well. I would suggest not playing both of them in the same lineup, but you can kind of mix and match it as well. I see Ebner as more of, like, a guy that can break the slate, whereas Darrington Evans, just a solid player. Toggle here, he actually didn't look bad as well. He only had a few snaps, but he looked good in those snaps. Darnell Mooney had a great catch, but he's probably not going to play that much. We are expecting the rookie, Velus Jones Jr., to be back for this game, and although the starters are only going to play 6 to 10 snaps, he probably needs to get some snaps, so he could play like the whole first quarter and the half of the second quarter as well. He'd be someone potentially that, is a good shutdown play. I don't love it. I don't trust it just yet. The receivers that actually popped the most on film were Dez Newsome, which we kind of thought he might do that. He's a decent player. That touchdown was a very nice play. And he kind of just popped on film. He kind of just was a guy that seemed to be open a lot. And when they got him the ball, he was making plays. So I don't mind Newsome. Tajay Sharp was impressive, and I think he kind of played himself into the receiver 2 role right now. So we'll see if he's actually going to be getting those starter reps, which would mean he'd be only playing a quarter. And obviously that's not something that we love. So, we kind of got to wait and see on that when the news breaks tomorrow about potential playing time from these guys. But for right now, I'm not really loving any of them. Yeah, like the receiver spot, just kind of dull there for the Bears. And that's comes down to the fact that they just weren't throwing the ball a lot. Okay, so if they are going to be running the ball a lot and not throwing it that much, that means that the Bears defense for the Showdown site is going to be great. Okay, they actually looked really good on film last week. They're one of the most impressive defenses last week. I was doing my write-up, and I think I highlighted 2 Bears players on the write-up, and that is kind of a skewed write-up towards fantasy football. Like, I'm skewing it towards that. So there was 2 players that popped so much that they were making plays that I wanted to write about it. Okay. And one of them was a Badger. I'm from Wisconsin. I like the Wisconsin Badgers. Jack Sanborn. I said that wrong, but he was playing so well that, it kind of stuck out. It was sticking out on the broadcast. So I kind of just mentioned him. The point is that the Bears defense should be in your builds. And honestly, guys, I probably would put them in the captain spot for another reason, being that the Seahawks offense it didn't look that good. It only looked okay once they were going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, like 3rd and 4th string. And while Geno Smith was still in there, and like their 2nd string was still in there, like the backups were going against backups. That's when the Seahawks offense started to produce. And that's kind of ugly. Obviously, we don't like that. So for now, what I'm looking at from the Bears is going to be really Ebner and then probably Darrington Evans. I don't want to put one of them. I guess you could put both of them in a build regardless of who's in the captain spot, but I don't particularly love that. So for the Seahawks side of it, the news broke that Drew Lock had COVID, so he's not going to play in this game. Okay, and this is where the slate gets difficult because we got to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback room. It can go 2 ways. Okay, so the way I see it is either Geno Smith is going to get basically the full game. That's going to be his audition game to see if he can earn that QB1 spot for the Seattle Seahawks. And then when Drew Lock is healthy next week, he'd be getting the full game in the 3rd game. And that'd be kind of the final test. All right, which one of you 2 is actually going to be our starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks? I think that's more logical than the second one because both of them look pretty bad. I mean, Drew Lock had just the typical mistakes he had in the Denver Broncos. He had some plays that popped. Okay. But Geno Smith, much more just conservative, making the right play and whatnot. He probably should be the starter, and I guess that'd be the worry is that, he already is the starter. Pete Carroll keeps saying he's the starter, so I guess that'd be the worry is that, he is the starter already, so you don't want to play your starter on the preseason, and that's where the second option comes into play here, is that because Geno Smith is their starter, he kind of just decides that already. We'd be looking at Jacob Eason as kind of the quarterback that's going to play a lot, and I do think that we're going to get this before lineup lock. I think we'll get this news before lineup lock from Pete Carroll. We'll have to see though. Okay. I really think it's either going to be one of those 2. I don't really see it being like, all right, Geno Smith's playing the first half and Jacob Eason is going to play the second half. At the very worst, I guess that's what it could be. But I think Jacob Eason, I don't really think he's a good player, but once again, it's all about, throwing the ball a lot. It's all about those numbers. If he's going to be throwing the ball 20 times, that's something that's going to be something I want to chase. Playing time is king this one. So maybe you do want to play him. For the Seahawks, I also like the Bears D because the Seahawks try to run the ball a decent amount, or their top players were players that were running the ball. So Rashad Penny might play in this game. I think he will. Maybe a series. Kenneth Walker not going to play in this one. He sustained an injury, so this is going to be, Rashad Penny's role now for a little bit until Kenneth Walker is back, and we'll have to see if that's going to be a while. I think this is Rashad Penny's job to lose now. So DJ Dallas is weird because he is like the poor man's version of Chris Carson. Like, he wants to be Chris Carson. He just doesn't have that burst that Chris Carson had pretty much. He carried the ball 10 times for 73 yards, so he did have a couple of big plays. But it was really as the game went on, and I think it's just because as he went against players that won't be NFL players, he really started to dominate them. You can kind of see the level change throughout the game, especially when you have someone like DJ Dallas playing a ton. Oh, there's I don't think you guys can see him. My cat's on the couch. I can see it in the camera, not on the screen, whatever. But yeah, DJ Dallas, like he looked good enough to produce. I guess that's the best way to look at it. And if he's going to be playing the amount of snaps that he played last week, and it makes sense for him to get that same allotment of snaps, DJ Dallas makes a lot of sense. And then Travis Homer, he looked good as well. Travis Homer is much more of the big play guy, whereas DJ Dallas is going to be much more of the safe play because, well, DJ Dallas is probably going to get right around 7 or so touches, so that makes him much more appealing. Whereas Travis Homer probably going to get around 4 targets, kind of like he did last week, and those 4 targets could lead to 2 catches for 40 yards, and then maybe he gets like 4 rushes for. Yeah, that could be a decent amount because if he's rushing the ball, it's most likely going to be a 3rd down situation, which means if he's rushing the ball, it's going to be a draw that probably gets like 7 or 8 yards. So that'd be something that's a little bit intriguing to me as well. Really, the only pass catcher that stood out for me on film that should get a decent amount of playing time is going to be the Dareke Young. Dareke Young was on the field the most out of any Seahawks receiver last week. That's intriguing to me. He did have a touchdown, 5 targets, and 30 yards. Like, that is pretty good from the rookie receiver. Like, they drafted him because body-wise, he's kind of the same as DK Metcalf. Now, obviously, he's not DK Metcalf as a player, but that's kind of, I think, the reason why they liked him as a player. And they wanted to draft him. They wanted to make sure that they got him instead of trying to pick him up as an undrafted free agent. Like, he was worth the look, and he looked good for the most part. I mean, none of them really stood out that much from the Seahawks. Like, Penny Hart is someone that has been connecting apparently with Geno Smith in camp, making some touchdowns and whatnot, so he'd be someone you could look at as well. Penny Hart is not a terrible play, but they're so banged up at the receiver spot that I think the rookie receiver that is kind of a developmental player that they want to maybe make a beast, maybe next year, it makes sense to get him playing time when you can right now. I'm just kind of looking this over, making sure I didn't miss any news. Cade Johnson did actually make some plays. He looked fine. Like, that's kind of the problem with the Seattle Seahawks. Like, Bo Melton made a couple of plays as well. They just spread the ball around too much. The targets were not that good coming from Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Like, it just is what it is. And if Easton's going to be playing, like, probably not going to be good there either. So it's kind of the problem with this slate. It's like we have a set base of like Bears D, Ebner, and then I probably like DJ Dallas and Travis Homer more than I do Darrington Evans, but it makes sense there. And then Dareke Young, like that's the only like players that I have confidence with. You could throw in Tarjay Sharp in there as well. You could potentially put in the Bears receiver Velus Jones Jr. if you want to. It's just a guessing game, especially with starters going to play 6 to 10 snaps. Like, we know it's going to be a series or 2, depending on how the offense does. And if they suck for 2 straight series, they might go back out again for another series. And then just looking at like kickers and tight end or kickers and D, like Seattle's defense could actually, I thought Simeon looked good. I thought Peterman looked good enough. I don't really see the Seahawks D kind of getting that lucky turnover from a quarterback kind of, I guess, getting nervous in the pocket and just making a bad play decision, holding on to the ball too long. That's kind of why I like the Bears D a little bit more. So maybe don't play the Bears or the Seahawks D, maybe, which sounds weird, but 2 kickers on the slate. Might have to play the 2 kickers. Like, it's unfortunate, but it kind of is what it is. So if you want to mix and match one of the kickers in there as well, you could. But for the most part, unless we get news about the Seahawks quarterback situation, this is going to be the build that I am looking at. But that's all I have for you guys for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a like and subscribe. I do appreciate that. I am curious. I want to know how you guys did last week because I feel like we had a really solid slate, each and every slate. Like, I feel like I gave out GPP winning advice by far on each slate. And I know I did because a couple of people that are kind of long-time 9-to-5 members took down a couple of GPPs, which is fun. Fun stuff. I don't know how big it was or anything like that, but they still took it down. Kind of fun stuff there. So I'm kind of curious as to some of these new people that are coming in, and I appreciate you guys. That's pretty awesome. I grew a lot last week. Hopefully we can continue that growth. I'm hoping that you guys had a good week as well. So hopefully you did. Kind of curious to hear about that, but we'll have another good week here in week 2. But know that week 3 will most likely be better because week 2 is kind of more of an educated guess week, more so than week 1, because we got to figure out the playing time and coaching tendencies, and that doesn't really come until game time. So Let's have a good slate. And as always, guys, let's keep cashing.